Well, hello, darlings. It's your Tutu here again. Gotta tell ya, some of this is new to me. I started to make this video a little bit ago and it froze up, so I'm going to start over from the beginning and hope that the same thing doesn't happen again. I love you. I miss you. We're in the middle of the Tale of Despereaux by Kate DiCamillo, and we're going to start book the fourth, Recalled to the Light. It's actually chapter 34, Kill 'em, even if they's already dead. Reader, you did not forget about our small mouse, did you? Back to the light. That was what Gregory whispered to him when he wrapped Despereaux in his napkin and placed him on the tray. And then Meg, after her conversation with Roscoe, carried the tray into the kitchen, and when she saw Cook, she shouted, "It's me, Midgery So, back from the deep downs." "Oh, lovely," said Cook, "and ain't we all relieved?" Mig put the tray on the counter. "Here, here," said Cook, "your duties ain't done. You must clear it." "How's that?" shouted Mig. "You must clear the tray," shouted Cook. She reached over and took hold of the napkin and gave it a good shake, and Despereaux tumbled out of the napkin and landed right directly plop in a measuring cup full of oil. "Ah!" said Cook. "A mouse in my kitchen and my cooking oil and my measuring cup. You, Mig, kill him directly." Mig bent her head and looked at the mouse slowly sinking to the bottom of the glass cup. "Poor little Missy," she said, and she stuck her hand into the oil and pulled him out by his tail. Despereaux, gasping and coughing and blinking at the bright light, could have wept with joy at his rescue, but he was not given time to cry. "Kill him!" shouted Cook. "Gore!" said Meg. "All right." Holding Despereaux by the tail, she went to get the kitchen knife, but the mouse tail, covered as it was in oil, was slick and difficult to hold on to, and Meg, in reaching for the knife, loosened her grip and Despereaux fell to the floor. Meg looked down at the little bundle of brown fur. "Gore," she said. "That killed him for sure." "Kill him even if he's already dead," shouted Cook. "That's my philosophy with mice. If they're alive, kill 'em. If they're dead, kill them. That way you can be certain of having yourself a dead mouse, which is the only kind of mouse to have." "That's some good sophisy, that is. Kill 'em even if they's already dead." "Hurry, you cauliflower-eared fool," shouted Cook. "Hurry." Despereaux lifted his head from the floor. The afternoon sun was shining through the large kitchen window. He had time to think how miraculous the light was, and then it disappeared and Meg's face loomed into view. She studied him, breathing through her mouth. "Little Missy," she said, "ain't you going to skedaddle?" Despereaux looked for a long moment into Meg's small, concerned eyes, and then there came a blinding flash and the sound of metal moving through air as Mig brought the kitchen knife down, down, down. Despereaux felt a very intense pain in his hindquarters. He leapt up and into action. Reader, he scurried. He scurried like a professional mouse. He zigged to the left. He zigged to the right. "Gore!" shouted Meg. "Missed him." "And ain't that a surprise?" said Cook, just as Despereaux scurried under a crack in the pantry door. "I got the little Missy's tail, though," said Meg. She bent over and picked up Despereaux's tail and held it up, proudly displaying it to Cook. "So," shouted Cook, "what good will that do us when the rest of him has disappeared into the pantry?" "I don't know," said Meg, and she braced herself as Cook advanced upon her, intending to give her a good clout to the ear. "I don't know." All right, chapter 35, The Knight in Shining Armor. Despereaux was pondering the reverse of that question. He was wondering not what he would do with his tail, but what he would do without it. He was sitting on a bag of flour high atop a shelf in the pantry, crying for what he had lost. The pain in his hindquarters was intense, and he wept because of it. But he also cried because he was happy. He was out of the dungeon. He had been recalled to life. His rescue had happened just in time for him to save the Princess Pea from the terrible fate that the rat had planned for her. So Despereaux wept with joy and with pain and with gratitude. He wept with exhaustion and despair and hope. He wept with all the emotions a young mouse who has been sent to his death and then been delivered from it in time to save his beloved can feel. Reader, the mouse wept. And then he lay down on the sack of flour and slept. Outside the castle, the sun set and the stars came out one by one, and then they disappeared and gave way to the rising sun, and still Despereaux slept. And while he slept, he dreamt. He dreamt of the stained glass windows and the dark of the dungeon. In Despereaux's dream, the light came to life, brilliant and glorious, in the shape of a knight swinging a sword. The night fought the dark, and the dark took too many shapes. First, the dark was his mother, uttering phrases in French, and then the dark became his father, beating the drum. The dark was Furlough, wearing a black hood and shaking his head no. And the dark became a huge rat, smiling a smile that was evil and sharp. The dark, Despereaux cried, turning his head to the left. The light, he murmured, turning his head to the right. He called out to the night. He shouted, "Who are you? Will you save me?" But the night did not answer him. "Tell me who you are," Despereaux shouted. The night stopped swinging his sword. He looked at Despereaux. "You know me," he said. "No," said Despereaux, "I don't." "You do," said the night. He slowly took the armor off his head and revealed nothing, no one. The suit of armor was empty. "No, oh no," said Despereaux. "There is no knight in shining armor. It's all just make-believe, like happily ever after." And in his sleep, reader, the small mouse began to cry. Okay, chapter 36. What Mig Carried. And while the mouse slept, Roscoe put his terrible plan into effect. Would you like to hear, reader, how it all unfolded? The story is not a pretty one. There is violence in it and cruelty. But stories that are not pretty have a certain value too, I suppose. Everything, as you well know, having lived in this world long enough to have figured out a thing or two for yourself, cannot always be sweetness and light. Listen, this is how it happened. First, the rat finished, once and for all, the job he had started long ago. He chewed through Gregory's rope, all the way through it, so that the jailer became lost in the maze of the dungeon. Late at night, when the castle was dark, the serving girl Midgery-So climbed the stairs to the princess's room. In her hand she carried a candle, and in the pockets of her apron were two ominous things. In the right pocket, hidden in case they should encounter anyone on the stairs, was a rat with a spoon on his head and a cloak of red around his shoulders. In the left pocket was a kitchen knife, the same knife that Midgery-So had used to cut off the tail of a certain mouse. These were the things, a rat and a knife and a candle, that Meg carried with her as she climbed up, up, up the stairs. "Gore," she shouted to the rat. "It's dark, ain't it?" "Yes, yes," whispered Roscoe from her pocket. "It is quite dark, my dear." "When I'm princess," began Meg. "Shh," said Roscoe. "May I suggest that you keep your glorious plans for the future to yourself? And may I further suggest that you keep your voice down to a whisper? We are, after all, on a covert mission. Do you know how to whisper, my dear?" "I do," shouted Meg. "Then please," said Roscoe, "please institute this knowledge immediately." Gore, whispered Meg. All right. Thank you, said Roscoe. Do I need to review with you again our plan of action? I got it all straight right here in my head, whispered Meg, and she tapped the side of her head with one finger. How comforting, said Roscoe. Perhaps, my dear, we should go over it again. One more time, just to be sure. Well, said Meg, we go into the princess's room, and she will be sleeping and snoozing and snoring, and I will wake her up and show her the knife and say, if you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me. And you will not hurt her, said Roscoe. No, I won't, because I want her to live so that she can be my lady in waiting when I become princess. Exactly, said Roscoe. That will be her divine comeuppance. Gore, whispered Meg. Yes, her divine comeuppance. Meg had, of course, no idea what the phrase divine comeuppance meant, but she very much liked the sound of it, and she repeated it over and over to herself until Roscoe said, and then? And then, continued Meg, I tells her to get out of her princess bed and come with me on a little journey. Ha, said Roscoe. A little journey, that is right. Ha, I love the understatement of that phrase. A little journey. Oh, it will be a little journey. Indeed it will. And then, said Meg, who was now coming to her favorite part of the plan, we take her to the deep downs and we give her some long lessons in how to be a serving girl, and we gives her some short lessons in how to be a princess. Oh, she gives me some short lessons in how to be a princess, and when we is all done studying up, we switch places. I gets to be the princess, and she gets to be the maid. Gore! Reader, this is the very plan that Roscoe presented to Meg when he first met her. It was, of course, a ridiculous plan. No one would ever, not for one blind minute, mistake Meg for the princess, or the princess for Meg. But Midgery So, as I pointed out to you before, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. And, reader, too, she wanted so desperately to become a princess. She wanted, oh, how she wanted. And it was because of this terrible wanting that she was able to believe in Roscoe's plan with every ounce of her heart. The rat's real plan was, in a way, more simple and more terrible. He intended to take the princess to the deepest, darkest part of the dungeon. He intended to have Meg put chains on the princess's hands and her feet, and he intended to keep the glittering, glowing, laughing princess there in the dark forever. So on to chapter 37, A Small Taste. She was asleep and dreaming of her mother, the queen, who was holding out a spoon to her and saying, taste this, my sweet pea, taste this, my darling, and tell me what you think. The princess leaned forward and sipped some soup from the spoon her mother held out to her. Oh, Mamma, she said, it's wonderful. It's the best soup I have ever eaten. Yes, said the queen, it is wonderful, isn't it? May I have some more? Said the pea. I gave you a small taste so that you would not forget, said her mother. I gave you a small taste so that you would remember. I want more. But as soon as the princess said this, her mother was gone. She disappeared, and the bowl and the soup spoon disappeared along with her. Lost things, said the pea, more lost things. And then she heard her name. She turned, happy, thinking that her mother had come back. But the voice was not her mother's. The voice belonged to somebody else, and it was coming from someplace far away, and it was telling her to wake up, wake up. The pea opened her eyes and saw Midgery So standing over her bed, a knife in one hand and a candle in the other. Meg, she said. Gore, said Meg softly. Say it, commanded Roscoe. Meg closed her eyes and shouted her piece. If you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me. Whatever for? Said the princess in an annoyed tone. As I have noted before, the princess was not a person who was used to being told what to do. What are you talking about? Meg opened her eyes and shouted, You got to come with me, so after we take some lessons, you some long lessons and me some short ones, together way down in the deep downs, I can be you and you can be me. No, shouted Roscoe from Meg's pocket. No, no, you are doing it wrong. Who said that? Your Highness, said Roscoe, and he crawled out of Meg's pocket and made his way up to her shoulder and situated himself there, laying his tail across her neck to balance himself. Your Highness, he said again, and he raised the spoon slowly off his head and smiled, displaying his mouthful of truly hideous teeth. I think it would be best if you do as Midgery-So suggests. She is, as you can quite clearly see, in possession of a knife, a large knife, and she will, if pushed, use it. This is ridiculous, the princess said. You can't threaten me. I'm a princess. We, said Roscoe, are all too aware of the fact of what you are. A knife, however, cares nothing for the fact that you are royalty. And you will bleed, I assume, just like any other human. The pea looked at Mig. Mig smiled. The knife glinted in the light of the candle. Mig, she said, her voice shaking the tiniest bit. I really do not think, said Roscoe, that Meg would need much persuasion to use that knife, princess. She is a dangerous individual, easily led. But we are friends, said the pea, aren't we, Meg? Eh? Said Meg. Trust me, said Roscoe. You are not friends, and I think it would be best if you addressed all your communications to me, princess. I am the one in charge here. Look at me. The pea looked directly at the rat and at the spoon on his head. Her heart skipped one beat and then two. Do you know me, princess? No, she said, lowering her head. I don't know you. But, reader, she did know him. He was the rat who had fallen in her mother's soup, and he was wearing her dead mother's spoon on his head. The princess kept her head down. She concentrated on containing the rage that was leaping up inside her. Look again, princess, or can you not bear to look? Does it pain your royal sensibilities to let your eyes rest on a rat? I don't know you, she said, and I'm not afraid to look at you. The pea raised her head slowly. Her eyes were defiant. She stared at the rat. Very well, said Roscoe. Have it your way. You do not know me. None the less you must do as I say, as my friend here has a knife. So get out of the bed, princess. We are going on a little journey. I would like it if you dressed in your loveliest gown, the one that you were wearing at a banquet not so long ago. And put on your crown, said Meg. Put that on your princess head. Yes, said Roscoe. Please, princess, do not forget your crown. The pea, still staring at Roscoe, pushed the covers back and got out of bed. Move quickly, said Roscoe. We must take our little journey while it is still dark and while the rest of the castle sleeps on. Ignorant, oh so ignorant, I am afraid, of your fate. The princess took a gown from her closet. Yes, said Roscoe to himself, that is the one, the very one. Look at how it sparkles in the light. Lovely. I will need someone to do my buttons, said the princess as she stepped into the dress. Meg, you must help me. Little princess, said Roscoe, do you think that you can outsmart a rat? Our dear Midgery-So will not lay down her knife, not even for a moment. Will you, Midgery-So? Because that might ruin your chances of becoming a princess, isn't that right? Gore, said Meg, that's right. And so while Mig held the knife pointed in the direction of the princess, the pea sat and let the rat crawl over her back, doing her buttons up for her, one by one. The princess held very still. The only movement she allowed herself was this. She licked her lips over and over again because she thought that she could taste there the sweet saltiness of the soup that her mother had fed her in her dream. "I have not forgotten, Mamma," she whispered. "I have not forgotten you. I have not forgotten soup." Oh, so on to chapter 38, To the Dungeon. The strange threesome made their way down the golden stairs of the castle. The princess and Meg walked side by side, and Roscoe hid himself again in the pocket of Meg's apron, and Meg pointed the sharp tip of the knife at the princess's back, and together they went down, down, down. The princess was led to her fate as around her everyone slept. The king slept in his giant bed with his crown on his head and his hands crossed on his chest, dreaming that his wife, the queen, was a bird with green and gold feathers who called his name, Philip, 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 without ceasing. Cook slept in a too small bed off the kitchen, dreaming of a recipe for soup that she could not find. "Where did I put that?" she mumbled in her sleep. "Where did that recipe go? It was for the queen's favorite soup. I must find it." And not far from Cook, in the pantry, atop a bag of flour, slept the mouse Despereaux, dreaming, as you know, reader, of knights in shining armor, of darkness and of light. And in the whole of the darkened sleeping castle, there was only the light of the candle in the hand of Midgery-So. The candle shone on the princess's dress and made it sparkle, and the princess walked tall in the light and tried not to be afraid. In this story, reader, we have talked about the heart of the mouse and the heart of the rat and the heart of the serving girl, Midgery-So, but we have not talked about the heart of the princess. Like most hearts, it was complicated, shaded with dark and dappled with light. The dark things in the princess's heart were these: a very small, very hot, burning coal of hatred for the rat who was responsible for her mother's death. And the other darkness was a tremendous sorrow, a deep sadness that her mother was dead, and that the princess could now only talk to her in her dreams. And what of the light in the princess's heart? Reader, I am pleased to tell you that the pea was a kind person. And perhaps more important, she was empathetic. Do you know what it means to be empathetic? I will tell you. It means that when you are being forcibly taken to a dungeon, when you have a large knife pointed at your back, when you are trying to be brave, you are able still to think for a moment of the person who is holding that knife. You are able to think, "Oh, poor Meg. She wants to be a princess so badly, and she thinks that this is the way. Poor, poor Meg. What must it be like to want something that desperately?" That, reader, is empathy. And now you have a small map of the princess's heart: hatred, sorrow, kindness, empathy. The heart that she carried inside her as she went down the golden stairs and through the kitchen. And finally, just as the sky outside the castle began to lighten, down into the dark of the dungeon with the rat and the serving girl. Okay, we've got to chapter 39. Yeah, I think we can do that one, don't you? Chapter 39, Missing. The sun rose and shed light on what Roscoe and Midgery-So had done, and finally Despereaux awoke. But alas, he awoke too late. "I haven't seen her," Louise was shouting, "and I tell you I wash my hands of her. If she's missing, I say good riddance. Good riddance to bad rubbish." Despereaux sat up. He looked behind him. Oh, his tail! Gone, given over to the knife, and where the tail should be nothing but a bloody stub. And more foul play. Gregory dead, shouted Cook. Poor old man. That rope of his broken by who knows what, and him lost in the dark and frightened to death because of it. It's just too much. Oh no, whispered Despereaux. Oh no, Gregory is dead. The mouse got to his feet and began the long climb down from the shelf. Once he was on the floor, he stuck his head around the door of the pantry and saw Cook standing in the center of the kitchen, wringing her fat hands. Beside her stood a tall woman, jangling a ring of keys. That's right, said Louise. All the king's men was down there searching for her in the dungeon, and when they came back up, who did they have with him? They have the old man dead, and now you tell me that Meg is missing, and I say, who cares? Despereaux made a small noise of despair. He had slept too long. The rat had already acted. The princess was gone. What kind of world is it, Miss Louise, where princesses are taken from right under our noses and queens drop dead and we cannot even take comfort in soup? And with this, Cook started to cry. Shh, said Louise. I beg you do not say that word. Soup, shouted Cook. I will say it. No one can stop me. Soup, soup, soup. And then she began to cry in earnest, wailing and sobbing. There, said Louise. She put a hand out to touch Cook, and Cook slapped it away. It will be all right, said Louise. Cook brought the hem of her apron up to wipe at her tears. It won't, she said. It won't be all right ever again. They've taken our little darling away. There ain't nothing left to live for without the princess. Despereaux was amazed to have exactly what was in his heart spoken aloud by such a ferocious, mouse-hating woman as Cook. Louise again reached out to touch Cook, and this time Cook allowed her to put an arm around her shoulder. What will we do? What will we do? Wailed Cook. And Louise said, shh, 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 there, there. Alas, there was no one to comfort Despereaux, and there was no time, anyway, for him to cry. He knew what he had to do. He had to find the king. For having heard Roscarol's plan, reader, Despereaux knew that the princess was hidden in the dungeon, and being somewhat smarter than Midge Rousseau, he sensed the terrible unspoken truth behind Roscarol's words. He knew that Meg could never be a princess, and he knew that the rat, once he captured the pea, would never let her go. And so the small mouse who had been dipped in oil, covered in flour, and relieved of his tail slipped out of the pantry and past the weeping ladies. He went to find the king. Well, I think that's enough for this session, don't you? I'll be doing you some more. Don't worry about that. In the meantime, keep calm, read on, and wash your hands. I love you.